All right, give me one more trade that might shake up the world.
Okay, Maxx Crosby traded from the Las Vegas Raiders to the Cincinnati Bengals for one first-round pick, the 10th pick overall. Ooh. Here's the idea. 6 weeks ago, he goes for 2 ones. That's not going to happen. You're Vegas, you still get a top 10 pick. And if you're the Cincinnati Bengals, and Greeny, you brought this up earlier in our production meeting. One, you desperately need a pass rusher, and this guy more than replaces Trey Hendrickson. But if you're in the business of keeping Joe Burrow happy, getting Maxx Crosby makes Joe Burrow happier to be a Bengal today than if they didn't have
Yes, because he's not just a great player, but he's a team leader.
Maxx Crosby to the Cincinnati Bengals. 1 first-round pick. The 10th overall selection. And if this trade happens, every single offensive coordinator in the AFC just lost sleep tonight. Because putting Maxx Crosby on a defense built around Joe Burrow's offense does not just make the Bengals better. It makes them the most dangerous two-way team in the entire conference. And the man who floated this scenario is not some internet analyst throwing darts at a wall. He is one of the most respected football minds in the league. Mike Tannenbaum, former NFL general manager. A man who has sat in draft rooms and made exactly these kinds of decisions at the highest level of the sport. And when Tannenbaum looks at the current landscape and says Maxx Crosby to Cincinnati makes the earth move, you do not dismiss it. You pay attention. But before we build the full case for why this trade works, we need to talk about what is actually happening with Joe Burrow and the Bengals right now. Because the context behind this hypothetical is not just about football strategy. It is about a franchise quarterback whose body language has been telling a story for months that Cincinnati's front office cannot afford to ignore. Plus, we are going to expose the knee situation that derailed the Ravens trade and explain why it actually represents an opportunity for Cincinnati rather than a reason to run. And we will get to the specific number, 1 first-round pick versus 2, and why the current moment in this negotiation makes this the most favorable acquisition window the Bengals will ever have for a player of Crosby's caliber. Stay locked in, because this is the trade that reshapes the AFC. Here is the foundation. Maxx Crosby is the best pass rusher available on the trade market right now. Not the best available given his age, not the best available with an asterisk, not the best available in a weak class, the best pass rusher available, period. His motor, his versatility along the defensive line, his ability to win with both power and speed, his leadership presence in a locker room, everything about what Crosby brings to a defense is elite. The Raiders know it. The league knows it. And every team that has serious Super Bowl aspirations has run the math on what adding him does to their defensive identity. The conversation around trading him has been percolating for weeks. 6 weeks ago, Tannenbaum notes the price was 2 first-round picks. That is what Crosby's market value looked like before the knee information started circulating. Before the Ravens backed out of a deal they had essentially agreed to. Before the uncertainty around his health began creating hesitation across the league. And now the price has shifted. 1 first-round pick. Specifically the 10th overall selection. A premium asset, a top 10 pick, the kind of capital that rebuilds franchises, but 1 pick instead of 2. That shift represents a negotiating window that the Bengals and every other AFC contender should be running through right now. And it gets more interesting when you understand exactly why Cincinnati is the perfect landing spot for this specific player at this specific moment. The Bengals just lost Trey Hendrickson, their best pass rusher. Gone. The defensive infrastructure that was already being asked to do an enormous amount of heavy lifting to keep Cincinnati competitive has just lost its most important piece. The pass rush is now a genuine vulnerability on a roster built to compete for championships with Joe Burrow throwing the football. And fixing that vulnerability through the draft at the 10th pick is far less certain than fixing it by acquiring a proven, established, dominant force who has already demonstrated he can take over games at the NFL level. Crosby does not just replace Hendrickson. He upgrades the position by multiple tiers and transforms Cincinnati's defensive ceiling from capable to genuinely fearsome. Now here's where it gets really interesting.
I mean, I just don't think it's going to need to be more than 1. It's going to need to be more than just 1 first-round pick for a guy the caliber of Maxx Crosby. I love it for Cincinnati. I love the fact that Joe Burrow needs to be appeased because, listen, I think we all see Joe Burrow's body language and feel like that team needs to improve, but I just think the compensation is going to need to be more the problem away from Las Vegas.
And Graz, what does the league think is going to happen with Maxx Crosby? I think if the Raiders do end up trading him, I think it takes a while.
Let us talk about the knee, because the elephant in the room of this entire trade conversation is the information that came out when the Baltimore Ravens backed away from what appeared to be a completed deal. The Ravens were in. The Raiders were in. The trade was as close to done as a trade gets without being officially announced. And then Baltimore pulled out. And the reason that emerged publicly pointed toward concerns about Crosby's knee, its current condition, its long-term durability, the risk profile attached to committing premium draft capital to a player with a documented physical concern at the most physically demanding position on the field. That information immediately chilled the market. Teams that had been actively pursuing Crosby went quiet. The 2 first-round pick price collapsed toward 1. And Maxx Crosby, one of the most complete defensive players in professional football, found himself in a situation where his market value had been undercut by a medical report before a single snap of the new season had been played. Here is why Cincinnati should view that situation differently than Baltimore did. The Ravens backed out of a deal because they had paid a specific price point that did not account for the knee risk. At the revised valuation, 1 first-round pick, the risk-reward calculation changes completely. You are not paying full market value for a healthy Crosby. You are paying discounted market value for a player who, even at less than 100%, is still a transformative defensive presence. If the knee holds up and Crosby plays at his peak, Cincinnati has stolen the deal of the decade. If the knee requires management and Crosby plays at 90%, the Bengals still have a far better pass rusher than anything they could draft with the 10th pick or find anywhere else on the market. The downside scenario of this trade, Crosby with some physical limitations, is still better than the current Bengals defensive situation. That is the calculation Cincinnati needs to make. And framed that way, the knee concern becomes a discount rather than a disqualifier. Now let us talk about what Maxx Crosby specifically does for Joe Burrow, because this is the dimension of the trade that Tannenbaum identified as the one that makes Cincinnati's front office obligation crystal clear. Joe Burrow has been patient. Remarkably, impressively, professionally patient with a franchise that has had persistent questions about its commitment to building a complete roster around him. His body language in recent months has said things his words have carefully avoided. The slight frustration visible at the edges of his media appearances. The quiet intensity of a quarterback who knows his window is real and finite and not being maximized as aggressively as it should be. If you are a Cincinnati fan watching this, and this matters directly to whether your franchise uses this window correctly, you need to understand what bringing Maxx Crosby into that building communicates to Joe Burrow at this specific moment. It does not just upgrade the defense. It tells the quarterback that the organization is willing to be aggressive, that they understand the urgency, that they are not going to wait for a perfect situation or a perfectly healthy player or a perfectly structured trade. They are going to make the move that gives their franchise quarterback the best possible chance to win right now. That message is priceless. And the alternative, passing on Crosby, drafting at 10, hoping whatever they select with that pick develops into a pass rusher who can actually help this season, sends the opposite message. It tells Burrow that Cincinnati is playing a long game when he needs wins now. And here is the hottest take Gridiron Insights is going to put on the table regarding this trade scenario, the one that is going to drive the most debate. The question is not whether the Bengals should trade for Maxx Crosby. They absolutely should. The question is whether the Raiders are actually ready to accept 1 first-round pick for a player they built their entire defensive identity around, and whether Cincinnati should be willing to go higher to guarantee the deal gets done before the draft window closes and the opportunity evaporates. Because here is the reality the Bengals cannot afford to ignore. The Raiders are in a rebuild. They have Fernando Mendoza at quarterback. They have Kirk Cousins as a bridge. They have a new coaching staff installing a new system. In that context, accumulating premium draft capital to accelerate that rebuild is the most rational organizational decision available. 1 top 10 pick is a meaningful asset. 2 picks at a slightly lower value might be even more attractive given what Las Vegas needs to build. If Cincinnati is serious about Crosby, and if they understand what Burrow's prime years actually mean for this franchise, they should be on the phone right now finding out exactly what it takes to get this done. Not waiting. Not hoping Vegas comes down in price further. Not assuming the opportunity will still be there after the draft when the Raiders' leverage changes and the market adjusts. Maxx Crosby is the rare player who makes a defense genuinely elite rather than merely solid. He is the kind of player who changes the outcome of January games, the games that matter most for a franchise built to compete in January. He is exactly what Cincinnati needs on the other side of the ball from Joe Burrow. And the window to acquire him at a price that makes organizational sense is open right now in a way it will never be again. The Bengals do not have a surplus of windows like this. Joe Burrow's prime years are happening now. Every season that passes without a Super Bowl is a season that cannot be recovered. And the difference between a Bengals roster with Maxx Crosby and a Bengals roster without him is not marginal. It is the difference between a team that can legitimately compete for a championship and a team that can realistically win 10 games and lose in the divisional round. That is the stakes. That is the choice. And the front office in Cincinnati needs to understand it with the same clarity that Tannenbaum delivered when he put this scenario on the table. Here is the bottom line. Maxx Crosby is available. The price has dropped from 2 first-round picks to 1 following the knee disclosure that spooked Baltimore. The Cincinnati Bengals just lost Trey Hendrickson and desperately need pass rush help. Joe Burrow's patience with this organization is not infinite. And one of the most respected football minds in the sport just laid out the trade that solves every single one of those problems simultaneously. My prediction: this trade does not happen before the draft but resurfaces with serious momentum in the weeks immediately following, with Cincinnati as the most logical destination once they assess what they actually have at the 10th pick versus what Crosby represents for their Super Bowl window. If you want to stay ahead of every development in this Maxx Crosby trade saga, hit that subscribe button right now. And drop a comment below. Do you think the Bengals should pull the trigger on Maxx Crosby for a first-round pick? Or is the knee risk too much of a gamble for a team that needs to win now? This is Gridiron Insights. We'll see you in the next one.